and their countries remain open to foreign exploitation. If we are to be really honest about the Bush and Cheney era, we have to admit that some good actually came out of it. Many Republicans fled their party. Many Democrats became radicals. We've got enough Bush jokes to entertain generations and generations. And as a result of US involvement in the Middle East, Latin America was able to uprise in many ways because they ceased to pay so much attention to what was going on in what historically has been known as the backyard of the United States. And they were remiss in addressing the social uplift movements that were sweeping through Latin America. And then a magical combination of the brutal misery that these people were living under, the entanglement of American resources, both intellectual and financial, in the Middle East, and a strong determination of the people of Latin America to fight against their oppressors, led to an unprecedented change, and it led to an unprecedented uprising of the popular masses in Latin America. American-style democracy was subverted, and the electoral process was used to elect leaders that challenged the status quo. And we began to see a change in Latin America. First with Hugo Chavez in Venezuela, a mulatto, somebody of African descent, mixed with white, far from the European descent rulers of Latin America. This was the first slap in the face of the oligarchy of Venezuela, that he put the oil resources to serve the interests of the Venezuelan people. Then we have Evo Morales in Bolivia, the first indigenous leader to rise to the presidency of any Latin American country, who came from the ranks of the indigenous movements. Then we have Correas in Ecuador. To some degree, we have Lula. We have Cristina Fernandez Kirchner in Argentina. We have Ortega. I have my reserves about Ortega in Nicaragua, but I believe he's the best alternative. We have Funes, who came from the FMLN in El Salvador. We have a movement in Latin America. Latin American countries, the people of Latin American countries are beginning to use this electoral process in spite of the media machine, in spite of the money that these people have, in spite of the fact that they commit fraud in every election, and they are beginning to elect their leaders. And they are beginning to elect people who actually look after their interests. And that is a bad example that the United States is not willing to tolerate. Because all of this is done through the electoral process. So now the change in policy begins to fail. Because the electoral process that's controlled, much like in the United States, by the media and by the popular culture, and through massive means of deception, is now being subverted. So now we have a time when military dictatorship is not working and the electoral process is not working, and the Latin American people are standing up against their oppressors. So what do? What does the US empire do? The election of Barack Obama to the White House brought about the idea that we were beginning a new era in American politics. The rhetoric changed from one of bullying unilateralism to one of collaboration and one of respect for the rule of law. And we were promised healthcare reform. We were told Guantanamo was closing down. We were told that Iraq was ending. We were promised a social uplift stimulus package for the people. We heard the president deliver a message to the Arab world from Cairo to give them hope for a new relationship between the United States and the Arab world. delivered from Cairo, like I said, a place where the ruler has been in power for 28 years. Never mind Zelaya, who's been in power for how many years? And hope returned to the hearts of the American public and to the hearts of the Arab world. And people began to talk about hope and about the idea of real change. But we as an organization have a duty to dig deeper, to think, to analyze, to look at the facts, to read between the lines, and to always question, always, no matter who's in power, regardless of the rhetoric, we have a duty to question, we have a duty to think, to analyze. And if we do these things, and if we look at the facts and we're honest about them, then we're able to see that the change that we were promised was largely a rhetorical change. It was a change not in the way that we do things or a change in the kinds of things that we do, but in how we express those things. The rhetoric has changed, the language has changed, but the policy has not changed. Because the infrastructure of empire building remains intact. And in some ways, we actually have gone backwards from the Bush and Cheney era. If you can believe that. At least when it comes to US foreign policy in Latin America. We are now in the era of Obama's soft power. Soft power not because the effects are softer, but because it preaches one thing while practicing the exact opposite. And we have Obama's speech at a university in Russia when he's saying that the only president that the US will recognize in Honduras is Manuel Zelaya, while at the same time Hillary Clinton is cooking up this negotiation with Oscar Arias from Costa Rica, which is meant to basically slow down the process of the return of the president, which is meant to buy time to discredit the social movements in Latin America. And we start hearing news about the FARC guerrillas being aided by Hugo Chavez, and we start hearing rumors about the presidency of President Correas in Ecuador being aided by the FARC in Colombia. And we see a tactic that's an old tactic, which is that of diverting attention to buy time in order to exhaust the people of Honduras, in order to undermine international support for the democratically elected president. So on one hand, we're saying we support Zelaya. On the other hand, we are undermining his return. And we are undermining the will of the people to fight for the return of their president. And we have something similar when we say that we're going to close Guantanamo, while the Department of Justice files requests to deny prisoners the right to habeas corpus. President Manuel Zelaya is not a radical.